So now I have the required amount of stitches that I need for my provisional cast on, all nicely on my circular needle and my spare cable, or if you're using waste yarn it would be on waste yarn. And I want to make sure that the last stitch is over the cable or waste yarn, and then that yarn goes to the back, because our first stitch is going to be a knit stitch at the other end of my needle here. It's for row 1, and it's going to start off with knit 4, and in this row we're going to place markers, and the markers are so we know where to increase at our raglan sleeve shaping. So the markers are there to easily increase in the right place without counting our stitches every time. So the yarn is going over the cable and towards the back, and then to knit these stitches they're going to form little triangles, some with the yarn forward and some with the yarn back. So you go into that triangle and knit, and it's knit 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually all of these stitches the yarn is coming to the front, not to the back, so that's how you're going to work it. And then that's our 4 knit stitches, and then we have a little purl section, so yarn comes to the front and then we purl. And as we're doing this, it's easy then to see the stitches nice and clearly, and the live stitches that are being held on the cable or waste yarn, and they're going to stay on that cable or waste yarn until we're ready to knit the neck. So I have to do a certain amount of purl stitches here before I place a marker, and in the pattern PM means place marker, so wherever you see PM, that means to place a marker. So I'm going to carry on doing this row and placing my markers where they need to go, and then we will be back with how to work the lace stitch and increases on row 2. So I'm just going to carry on here and I'll see you in a bit. So here I am, I've placed 3 of my markers already, and the markers go to place to mark where the increases are. So the increases are going to happen either side of these markers, and this little section here with the smallest amount of stitches, that's the very top of the sleeve. So we have left front, left sleeve, back, which is the most amount of stitches, and then right sleeve, and then right front. So I'm about to mark now with my little markers that remind me of piercings. That's my 4th marker. So here's my right sleeve stitches here, and then I purl to the last 4 stitches, and I've already counted these, so I know I've got the right amount. And yeah, it's very, very important to keep counting your stitches, because if you've made a mistake, if you've knitted 2 together by mistake, or if you've done a yarn over, or knitted twice into a stitch by mistake. So I recommend counting stitches very regularly, especially after an increase or decrease row. In my patterns I always make sure that if there's any increasing or decreasing happening, then I give a stitch count at the end of that row or round, so that you can count your stitches and make sure you have the correct number. So here I am almost at the end of row 1, and I know that I finish this row with a knit 4. Now every row for the body starts off and ends with a knit 4, because the beginning and end of the row is actually going to be the finished edge for both fronts. So it has to be nice and neat. I know some people like to slip the first stitch of each row. I'm carrying on and I'm purling these when I should be knitting. But I don't do that. I don't find that I need to do that, but if that's something that you do, you can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the end of row 1. You can see our stitches nicely on our needle and on the spare cable here. And these stitches are going to become, these are going to become the body and the sleeves, and these are going to become the collar or neck trim later on. So now I'll turn around and we can start row 2. And on this row we're going to be doing the lace stitch and the first row of increasing. So as before, we start with a knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we start our lace section. Now there's an asterisk, which usually means that there's another one following it, and we're going to repeat the section between the two asterisks or asterixes. Asteri. I don't know the plural for asterisks. I'm going to have to find that out. So first instruction is knit 2 together 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So instead of just knitting into one stitch, I'm going into both of those two and knitting them together. And then we do the next section, which is yarn over, knit 1 6 times. So for yarn overs, when I'm knitting, I bring the yarn between the needles and then over to the back. I know some people go the other way. I find that gives a bigger hole, so it uses more yarn. I like a smaller hole, so I'm coming forward between the needles and then towards the back, and then knit 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, need more yarn, 5, 6, and then we do 3 knit 2 togethers again. 1, 2, 3, and then we repeat all of that that came after the first asterisk. So we go back and knit 2 together 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and then we do our yarn over, knit 1 6 times again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then our knit 2 together 3 times. Again, 1, 2, 3. And then the next instruction, now we have 2 asterisks. So we're going to repeat the section between the two asterisks. And that is knit to 2 stitches before the marker. Now, I only have 2 stitches here before my marker, because this section is going to increase for the raglan shaping. So there's going to become, each time we do an increase, there's going to become another stitch here. So here we have 2 stitches before our marker, and then we're going to do a make 1 right. Now to do the make 1 right, I'm going to pick up this bar that's between the stitch I just worked and the stitch that's on the left hand needle. So I'm going to pick it up from the front onto the left hand needle so that it slants towards the right. And then I'm going to knit into the front of that. I just did that to give me a bit of slack to get in there because it's pulling taut on the back. So knit into the front of that, and the reason I'm knitting into the front of that is to close up that loop, otherwise you'd have quite a big eyelet there and I don't want that. So that is slanting towards the right, so that's a make 1 right. And then we knit 2, And then here's our marker. So SLM is slip marker, so it just slips from left to right. Then we knit 2. We're in our sleeve section. And we're going to make 1 left. So as before, I'm going to pick up the bar between the stitches, but instead of putting it on this way, I'm going to put it on from behind so that it slants towards the left. And then instead of knitting into the front, which would make this big hole, I'm going to knit into the back of it to close up that gap. And then it's slanting towards the left. And then I knit to 2 stitches before that marker, and then I'm going to do another right slanting increase, so make 1 right, knit 2, slip marker, knit 2, make 1 left. Didn't quite go into that cleanly. And then I'm going to knit across the back section until I get to 2 stitches before the next marker, which is over here. And so that is repeated there. And then the lace stitch is repeated at this end. So I'm going to carry on with that to complete row 2. I mocked up a little swatch here to show you what I mean by if you're doing the 2-colour version and after you change to the contrast colour, I tell you to twist the yarns together at the beginning of every wrong side row, and that is so that you have a nice neat finish, because this is going to be the finished edge of one of the fronts. So you can see that the main colour here running up the side of the contrast colour is sort of neatly twisted in. So I'm working on the main colour here, so I'll show you what I do. I just twist once around, so either go under or over, and then don't pull it tight, otherwise that'll ruche it up. Just leave it, obviously not too loose, you don't want to loop either. So just knot tight and then carry on working. Because if you didn't do that, you would have a big loop of the main colour here on the contrast bit and the contrast here on the main colour bit. And as it's a finished edge, you don't want that to happen. So that's a nice way to just work those yarns in. And of course when you change over from contrast to main and vice versa, you do that as well. Twist them around one another just so you get to the next colour, and that stops any gaps or loops happening. And then just carry on working and do that every time you get to the wrong side is where the 2 yarns change. So every time you get to a wrong side row, make sure to twist around to catch in those different coloured yarns there.